welcome back to The Composer's Life. I'm Nadia, your host, and today I have very exciting news because I'll be interviewing Blair Mowat. Blair Mowat has composed over 200 scores for films, theatre, and television, with clients ranging from the English National Ballet and the Royal Shakespeare Company to the likes of BBC, Sky, and ITV. He is a BAFTA-nominated award-winning composer with over 15 years' experience and is considered a fast-rising star in the industry. His work includes Class, an acclaimed 8-part Doctor Who spin-off series on BBC One, ITV's international hit show McDonalds Dodds, and Sky's The Amazing Mr. Blunden, written and directed by Mark Gatiss. His score for Nolly, a mini-drama series on ITVX, was just nominated for a BAFTA, so make sure to go check it out after you've listened to the interview. Hi Blair, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So I guess I'll just get right into the questions I have for you today. So we'll just start at the beginning. What led you to start composing?
So it was back at sort of school when I was maybe 14 or so. I started to move into composition because I basically wasn't enjoying my piano lessons enough. I had a very strict German piano teacher who was quite scary and would get angry at me for not practicing enough. And she heard me one day playing something that she didn't recognize when she sort of gone to the bathroom and come back. And she was like, "Oh, what's that? What you playing?" And I'm like, "Oh, it was something that I wrote myself." And she said, "Oh, well, you it's beautiful playing. You don't play Mozart that way. You don't play Bach that way. Like maybe you should be a composer." And because it's really good. And so she sort of set me up with a guy that she knew called Kenneth Dempster, who was a university lecturer at one of the universities in Edinburgh, and I got some sort of like one-on-one lessons with him to kind of develop my sort of compositional voice. And then at the same time, I was playing in a band at school, doing rock music and writing kind of like rock and pop songs for that indie rock sort of type stuff for that band. And then my school studies also involved music, so I had to write music for the exams that I was doing and sort of submit these compositions. And so that turned out as chamber pieces that then went into like symphonies. And I started to realize, and I guess the people teaching me started to realize that I had like an aptitude for this. There was something innate within me that could be developed further. And so I went off and decided to study music. And I didn't really know when I was like, it's not like I knew when I was 4 or 5 years old that I was going to go off and study music. I enjoyed music and I played instruments from an early age. But that realization came, sort of like when sort of the middle of my teens, towards the end of my teens, really. So I did a bit of catching up with those like composition, tutorials like I was talking about, and made sure my theory was up to scratch, got my piano, started practicing piano a bit better than I had done before. And off I went to Durham University to study music in the northeast of England. So I studied there. I did a master's after that in composition for film and television at Bristol University. And whilst I was there, I just did a huge amount of extracurricular stuff, working with the orchestras. I did a lot of conducting, and I would adapt. So I would like take down film scores that weren't available by ear, and I would arrange them for the orchestra, take it to rehearsals, rehearse it with them, and then the musicians would give me feedback on like, "Oh, this works, this doesn't work, like I need a breath here, this is a bad key for me, like could we change it?" And I would learn loads of different stuff about orchestration and composition through reconstructing these film scores and actually interacting with the musicians who were playing them. So it was an amazing experience. And I got to do all sorts of crazy stuff. Like I did a orchestral version of Plug-in Baby by Muse. And I did this thing called the Radiohead transcriptions, which was like 1 bar of one Radiohead song and then 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars, like all stitched together. And just got to do all these wild, like cool projects. And obviously the musicians are going to do them for free because they're students. They just want to perform and get involved. So it was like the most creative, amazing experience to have. So yeah, it's kind of how I started to get into it.
That sounds like an amazing experience at school.
Yeah.
That would be so helpful just to learn, like you said, just working with actual musicians and everything. And I'm sure it helped a lot with your own music to break down film scores and do all those arrangements.
Definitely. And it's like so cool to actually get to conduct an orchestra and like learn conducting. Because obviously, like when I started conducting the orchestra, we did have a few conducting lessons within our course. But you need to like do it to get better at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, how often are you going to be in front of like a massive orchestra and have the
Yeah.
opportunity to mess up? That's a good point. I loved that you said your German piano teacher was like, oh, you're not playing Mozart, like you're playing that. That's really interesting. I love that through composing your own music, you kind of found your performer, I guess, like putting emotion into music. It really helps connect with that, I think, composing.
It probably just means I'm a narcissist because I only play my own music well.
I mean, if you can admit it, I guess. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just being facetious. But obviously, I was obviously passionate about the thing that I'd written because it come from me rather than something that somebody had written 400 years ago that didn't particularly connect with me, because it was more of like a technical exercise than it was something that's emotional. And film scores are very emotional. They're designed to reflect emotion a lot of the time. And some of those earlier classical period works, I wouldn't exactly call them emotional. It's not until we get to some of them are, there's bits of Beethoven, like the Eroica Symphony or whatever, but once you get into the sort of romanticism of, things like Rachmaninoff and stuff like that, I mean, that is, incredibly evocative and emotional.
So, I mean, it's great that your teacher kind of hooked you up with lessons, and it seems like everything kind of fell into place at once, and you were just like, okay, I guess I'm doing this.
Yeah, I did, because I was really interested in filmmaking as well, and I did make like films with my friends and stuff. I make these like silly like horror movies with like a mini DV camera and have them dress up and give them blood capsules in their mouth to bite down on and stuff. And it was, I wanted to be like a filmmaker, and then I realized that writing music for film and television is being a filmmaker. You're part of the filmmaking process, and so I became very interested in that. I just had like laser focus to go and do that particular thing. And I felt very lucky to have that desire and wish to do that so emphatically, because I just knew everything I was working towards in my extracurricular stuff, in my studies, it was all going towards one place. And I knew that incredibly young. So I do feel very fortunate to have that, because it stood me in really good stead for what I'm doing now.
It seems that because you knew what you wanted to do, you were able to just focus everything on it and just get all of the education and experiences that you could, which has had to have helped.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I came into the industry too young to get work, because I was like 21 when I finished my master's, shortly to be 22 at that point. But I was a baby, so nobody really wanted to hand me large amounts of money to write music. So I did an incredible amount of short films, working with up and coming directors who were on a similar journey to me. But even though I had the technical skill set to do those kind of higher end jobs, I wasn't getting them to begin with, because I think there was a certain amount of ageism, and people were always going to trust somebody who's had more experience. And eventually, you sort of grow into yourself, and the people that you've been coming up with are starting to get jobs and recommending you. And I'm now at the point where sometimes I come on to a project and the exec producers are younger than I am, and I'm like, oh, this is so different from how it was back 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, it's really interesting, sort of seeing that journey happen. And of course it happens so gradually that you barely notice it until you start looking back.
In your bio, it says that you have composed for over 200 scores for film, television, and theater. So I'm just wondering, like, what came first? Was it film because you had been making films with your friends, or?
The first film, it was actually a piece of theatre called I think it was called The Three Estates, which was a Scottish play. And I did the music for that, and it was the school put on a production that I was at. And I remember that my music made Mr. Neil Chalmers, cry. So I was just incredibly um, flabbergasted that I managed to make Chalmers cry. So I knew that I had something at that point. And yeah, that was after that. I didn't really get a chance to really get into film because film back in this would have been like 2004, 2003. Yeah, when I left school, I was about 2004, and film wasn't really in a great space for making like amateur short film productions particularly well. I kind of went along. I had a look at the Durham University film making group, and I actually turned my nose up at it a little bit because I saw the films and I just didn't think they were very good. And I saw what the theatre was doing, and the theatre production was amazing. It was just phenomenal, and they had an orchestra pit, and so I ended up pitching this version of Dracula to well, they were doing Dracula, and I said to them, listen, I would love to do this with like choir and orchestra, like get live players in. And that was one of the first theatre productions that I did when I was at university, and I basically did a big film scorey type score to go along with this really, fantastic theatre production. And so I did about 14 plays when I was at Durham, everything from Wee Clo to Angels in America to Under Milk Wood, all sorts of stuff. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. I did a whole variety of theatre productions, and I just threw myself into that and conducting the orchestras, and I just completely ignored the film part of the university. That did change, however, when I got to Bristol University, because films were starting to be made at a much higher level just in that short space of time, because cameras had developed. They had these things like the Canon 7D and the Canon 5D Mark II. The kind of precursors to those existed, which allowed you to shoot in something called progressive mode, which made it look like a film in 1080p. And so I was like, wow, people are actually making films that look like films. They don't look like documentaries anymore like they did 3 years ago. So I got really involved with the film group there, and I did the music for a short film called Arcadia, which was by a very talented director called Adam Butcher, who did the whole thing on green screen. This is a student in his undergrad degree who did a whole film on green screen, creating this like cardboard universe that the characters existed in. And I was just like, this guy's a visionary. So I did this string quartet score that I recorded with musicians at Bristol for the film. And yeah, that was kind of one of the first films that I actually did music for.
So you always knew you wanted to do film. It was just a matter of what's the best thing for me to do right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually tell a lie, because the actual first ever film score I did was, we did a 48-hour film challenge, which was part of a film festival in Edinburgh. This would have been 2003 or 2004. And we made a film together called Coco Latte, which was the title that we were given. That was about a coffee cup that comes home from prison. And then there's this like weird tension in this friendship group with the two guys there. And I edited it. I learned how to edit in one day using this software called ULead that they'd given us on CD. And then I stuck my keyboard, like Casio keyboard or whatever it was, into the computer with like an audio line in. And I just played live like the score, because it all had to be done in such a short space of time. So I scored the whole 5-minute movie in about 3 hours, and I stayed up all night. I didn't get any sleep, and then I rushed with the like the mini DV tape that it was then put onto from the computer to the place on my bicycle to go hand it in, so that we made the deadline okay. And that was technically my first ever film score, and I was almost like a silent film with me just playing it in live.
Was the festival doing like a competition kind of a thing?
It was a competition. Yeah. It was indeed a competition, and I don't think we won it, because I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. But I think everybody found the film quite captivating, considering that it was a bunch of people who were learning on the job. And I've still got it somewhere. Thankfully, it doesn't exist online, I don't think. And I'm very happy about that, because it's kind of an odd very low budget film. I actually did a bit of a rescore of it in my early 20s, where I realized I could do much more advanced sort of music for it. And I had fun playing around with that. So that probably exists somewhere as well on my hard drives.
Do you still compose for theater now, or do you mainly do television and film?
I mainly do television and film. I have done theatre. I did a bunch of stuff at the Soho Theatre when I moved to London. Theatre pays very poorly. It really, especially in the UK. If you're on Broadway or something, then it's great. But yeah, theatre really should be paid better, and it isn't. And I managed to get some theatre gigs when I was in my early 20s in London, because I'd go in for the interview and they'd be like, "Oh, this is all we've got." And I'm like, "How much? Wow, that's not very much." But yeah, I'll do it.
But I'm 20 and I can't get films type thing.
Yeah, I had to learn. I had to learn this software called, I think it was called SFX3, that you decide where all the music goes to different speakers and stuff, and you have to program it in advance. And it was quite complicated. And I remember sitting there on the Saturday with the manual, just like going through it. And I don't think anybody realized that I didn't really know how to use this software, and I had to learn it all in a very short space of time. And it was fine. It was all good. I managed to do it. I was kind of faking it till I made it there in that particular situation. I then moved out of doing as much theatre stuff. I would then do something for the Royal Shakespeare Company for my friend Owen Horsley, who's a brilliant theatre director, at a later date. But in general, I haven't done much theatre for a while. And that really has just been because I've sort of been sucked into the film and TV world. And yeah, even at the higher level, it's pretty tough to make ends meet and pay the bills on the theatre side of stuff. So yeah, I would definitely do more for the right project, the right person. You don't really do, obviously you don't do theatre for the money. You do it for the exhilaration of like working with a group of people, and you get to know them because you end up going to rehearsals and stuff, and you become friends with them, and then you go on like tour, and you get to go for the premiere and stuff, and it's always there on stage, living every night, and it's an amazing, beautiful thing. And one of the best experiences I had was a play called The Exquisite Corpse, which we went to started off at the Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff, and then we took it up to the Edinburgh Festival. And so The Exquisite Corpse is a game where, if you draw the head of something, you draw the body, and you draw the legs, and you fold the paper, and you hand it to people, and they draw something different. You don't know what it's going to turn out like. This was a show that had like 16, 17 scenes, I think, and they would perform it in a different order every day based on how the audience took the balls out of a bag. And then they'd put that up on stage, and the scenes had some thematic connections. So they weren't all part of the same play. They were all like different scenes that were sort of written as these like mini moments. But when you put them in a certain order, they have different connotations, and it feels like maybe some of the scenes are linked to other ones. So sometimes you get a day where it'd be really dark, because you'd have like 4 or 5 in a row starting it off that were just the darker ones, and that would set the tone for the whole show. And then you'd have other days where it was incredibly sort of light and magical, and it just go in a completely different direction. And the music would have to change depending on the order of stuff as well. So I was the one who was doing the live sound diffusion and sort of choosing like where the tracks went. So it was quite complicated, but it meant that I had to be there every day. So we were on at about 2 p.m. and we could then, after the show had finished, we could go and see other shows, end up having some drinks, get drunk until 3 a.m, have a curry, and then at the Mosque Kitchen, which was this amazing curry place that's open in Edinburgh at that time of night during the festival. And then we'd go home, sleep until late, and do it all again. So I did that for like 4 weeks in a row. It was amazing.
I guess compared to film, you're just like so involved with everyone in the theater production. Like, everyone a lot more, I imagine, than film.
You do, especially obviously if you're in the same country. I do know composers who will do stuff, for theatre in other countries, and then they'll just go across for the premiere or for the sort of the tech rehearsal and stuff like that. And I think as you get busier and better known in your career, it's harder to give up that huge amount of time for some of the theatre stuff. But it really depends. Everything's changed since COVID as well, because everything's a lot more remote, or people realized they could save a lot of time by doing things remotely than we used to. So I don't know how things have changed.
You were talking about how different film production was like in the early 2000s compared to now. Like when I work on a student film, they can be not as good still,
Sure. Yeah.
but they can be
Yeah.
really good as well. And there's just so many more platforms and ways to put your own work out now. So I'm sure that's changed a lot as well.
Yeah, it has. But I mean, even the way in film and television that we now do spotting sessions, for example, where we go through and decide where the music's going to go, they're pretty much 90% done over Zoom now, or over some kind of digital interface with people. Even if you're in the same city, people will be in different parts of, it takes ages to get into various places, and everyone just does it online now. You do still get some spotting sessions in person, but in the majority, yeah, it's all done online now, which actually suits me very well because I do a lot of work where I might be in a different country from the people I'm working with, and it also allows me to like record the spotting session so I can refer back to it, and it's like traveling back in time to be able to see exactly what the director said. So yeah, it's awesome.
That sounds really helpful, actually, because no matter how good you are at taking notes, there's just a lot that gets forgotten and lost.
Absolutely, yeah. And also when you take notes, you're not concentrating as much as if you're not taking notes. So it's just great to be able to have that really focused dialogue with the director and the producer or whoever else might be on the call.
The listeners don't know this, but we talked a bit about how you're mostly based in Los Angeles, but you still go back to London and Edinburgh sometimes.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the year and stuff. But yes, yeah. As of like 2 years ago, I now have a studio that I built here in Los Angeles, and I tend to do most of my work here. And the idea was that I've also got a studio space in London, and that I would go across and do stuff there. But I found that ever since COVID, made flights more expensive, made it more difficult to travel, yada yada yada. I basically, when I'm across in London, I find myself only doing like meetings and spending time with friends and stuff, and then I tend to retreat back to LA to do most of my work. So I do want that to change in the future, and I would love a 6 month here, 6 month there system. I would need to work a little bit on stuff on the other side of the ocean to sort of make sure that everything's equal and parity in terms of the instruments and sort of analog gear and various things that I have. And it's expensive to buy everything twice. Let's put it that way.
And to live between two countries.
Yeah, it is. It is an amazing thing to do. It really is so nice to be able to go to somewhere so different and back and forth. But yeah, for the time being, I sort of spend most of the year over here.
Before COVID, were you traveling a lot more between the two countries?
Not so much. That sort of decision to sort of come over here really sort of came around about 2019. And that's when I started looking into sort of building the studio here. And yeah, it was from that point that I was coming back and forth more. But then obviously COVID made that difficult. I did come out here in 2017, and I did some good meetings and stuff, and realized that it was nice to meet people over here. There's all these complexities around visas and what who they're allowed to hire and stuff like that if you don't have a residency or a green card and stuff here. And sometimes there's a co-production where they need somebody who's based in the UK for co-production reasons. So there's all sorts of intricacies to film and television in terms of the tax rebates and stuff like that, which can put you in an advantageous position if you happen to be based in one particular country.
Kind of moving into more about your everyday composing process. When you receive a film or a TV series to work on, what is your process to start composing for it? Or even if it's not you immediately start writing music, what do you do when you receive something?
Yeah, I think it depends on when you receive that, because I am lucky enough to often be on things at a very early stage where the scripts have been written but the show hasn't been filmed yet. So that allows me to go away to the piano, which is where I usually start, and I'll try and come up with themes, like a strong melodic theme or like motif, harmonic ideas, and just really explore the score in a very basic way at the piano, not worrying too much about instrumentation and just trying to find strong melodic hooks to get something strong for the score to be based on. And then after that, it can change when you see the rushes, or when when they start sending you the assemblies, they call them, when they edit together all the rushes from that week and they put the scenes so that the exec producers and whoever else wants to see them can sort of see how the show is progressing. And that allows you to get a sense of, oh, actually, maybe that's not going to work. Maybe we need to take it more in this direction. Maybe it needs to be more sparse and more textural. And it really properly kicks off when you get that locked cut. Sometimes I end up working on stuff that's unlocked. It's always a very frustrating process, and it's actually very common in America to be working on unlocked stuff. People kind of actually sort of laugh because sometimes it never locks. It's always moving around, basically up until when it goes off to be sent to the cinema or sent to broadcast, which is why we have music editors in America, because they deal with the nightmare that comes as a result of that sort of ever-changing edit. In the UK, they're much better at actually locking stuff and giving you a certain amount of time with a locked episode. And that might be partly budgetary differences as well, because it's expensive to mess around with stuff until the last minute. Once you've locked something, every time you make a change and it has a knock-on effect, of course, that comes with financial burdens as well. So yeah, when you get that locked cut, that's when I'll usually sit down, and I've started doing things in chronological order a lot of the time now. So I will go from the start, and sometimes I won't even watch the whole thing, and I'll actually if I'm moving very fast, then I will just go from the start to the finish and find out what's going on. If I haven't read the script, find out what's going on as it happens and react to it. Because sometimes you don't want to preempt certain stuff that you might know later, that somebody could be a villain or whatever. Sometimes it's useful to know that information so you don't accidentally make somebody seem more like a villain. It really depends on the project. Usually you have watched stuff in advance, because when you do the spotting session with the director, you go all the way through stuff. But on the stuff that I occasionally work on where I'm just sort of left to my own devices, and I'm doing it very quickly, I might just go through it as I go along. I think network television would work a bit more like that, which doesn't really exist as much these days. But when they used to crack out episodes like one a week, back in the old days of American network television, which they still do a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a nice way of working, where you just kind of find out as the audience does as you go along. But some composers prefer to choose a particular big moment or big scene that they can focus in on, to then find that and then extrapolate everything else from it. I usually leave the big emotional scenes until the very end. If it does end up in a kind of big epic place at the end, I find that I write better music if I've got my toolkit sorted and I know everything that's come before it at that moment. So yeah, I try to work as chronologically as possible. And after I've got my themes from the piano, I will then start developing the instrumentation. Sometimes I'll go back to old cues and add in like new instruments that I might have made through like sampling, or just discovered, that one of the instruments around the studio, I can get a cool sound out of it and then record that with the microphone. The more and more I progress in my career, the more I've tried to use live instrumentation and making cool sounds out of everyday objects, and trying not to rely on samples as much, so that the music sounds more unique and more idiosyncratic. But sometimes you just, it's a sampled score, or well, usually if you're doing something which is orchestrally sampled, it's hopefully going to be replaced by a live orchestra, and then you don't need to worry too much about the programming, and you can, because it's going to get replaced by those live.
It's going to sound good.
Yeah. It's amazing how much they can bring to life something. If it's programmed badly and it doesn't have, amazing dynamics, it was done very quickly, and then the musicians really bring it to life, it can add so much to a piece of music. So I always like to work with a live ensemble if I possibly can. And Yeah, it's hard because you don't always get the budget. There's not always the expectation, for example, in British television, that you will record it with a live orchestra, and they'll give us something called a package deal. And so it's then really up to you how much you want the music to sound good. And that's tricky because, of course, we want our music to sound the best it possibly can be because our name is on it. But at the same time, we still gotta buy food at the supermarket. So yeah, and sometimes I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I probably would have made a lot more money if I wasn't, because I've made certain creative choices, production choices to make stuff sound good that I probably would have made a lot more if had I not. But I don't have any regrets on that, because I'm sort of the belief that the more that you invest in yourself and your music, it becomes an exponential curve of people respecting your music and being drawn to it because it has, it's of very high value and high production values. And people are then going to come and seek you out. And those people are going to have bigger and bigger budgets the more you kind of progress up the ladder. But it's harder to do. The earlier you are in your career, the harder it is to do that, because the less you're getting paid. So it's a bit of a glass ceiling. It's a bit of a catch-22. So I have a lot of empathy for people starting out in this business, because for me, I found it incredibly difficult. The beginning of composing for film and television, it was tricky.
What does like day-to-day schedule look like for you when you're working on like a TV series?
It's pretty brutal. It depends. I go through various stages of getting up early or getting up late. I tend to be a night owl, so I do tend to go to bed relatively late, and I will quite often work in the evenings. I tend to find I have a big push of productivity in the morning, and then there's probably some emails that need to be answered in the afternoon. I'll take off the evening to have dinner and stuff, and spend some time with people, hopefully. But I do often go back to the studio after that, and I do find that time between like sort of 9 and 12, or half 8 and 12, incredibly productive. For some reason, there's this sort of creativity that comes to life during those hours, which is really useful. But it really depends on the show and their schedule. In an ideal world, I would work 9 till 6, and then I would just do Monday to Friday. It never works like that for me, in my experience. There are periods where you're working 6 or 7 days a week for weeks on end, and then you get a couple of weeks off once you finish that project, and you say, I'm not going to work at all, apart from doing administrative stuff for good 14 days, and I'm effectively going to go on some kind of annual leave. And I think you need to do that for your mental health, for your physical health, so that you're not just sitting sedentary in a chair for days and days on end. That's not healthy for anyone. That's literally slowly killing us. So I think it's important to take that time to have a bit of a break. But yeah, for me, I work very intensely. So I lose myself in the project. I don't tend to see people, friends and family, as much as I would normally do. And I just get completely lost and obsessed in it. Is kind of how I work. It's not healthy. I wouldn't advise it, but
Okay.
it's just what works for me. And I do think we're often put into that position because we're last in the chain, and somebody somewhere has probably given notes, and the edit, like sometimes it locks on time. And I have a huge respect for people who can actually lock their episodes on time.
It's kind of interesting just listening to you explain that process, because going into composing or like film scoring in general there's not like a step-by-step program to follow where you like do this, apply for this job, get hired, get promoted, but then even when you are getting work, the work itself is not organized either.
No, it's not.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah. It's if you have like attention deficit disorder or something like that, it's incredibly difficult to because you're going to spend all of your time by yourself. It's very difficult for people to self-motivate when they're by themselves and they don't have somebody who is checking up on them, every day or every few days. Your producer on your TV project isn't going to email you saying, which cues were you working on today? Like, how many minutes have you done this week? Unless they're a very needy producer, and I haven't encountered anyone quite like that. Yeah, you're just kind of left to it, and so it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you need to make sure that you're keeping yourself healthy and focused and enthusiastic, so you don't burn out too early. It definitely suits certain personality types more than others. The problem is that a lot of people who are very creative do tend to fall into this slightly attention deficit, hyper focus, periods of hyper focus, and then they get lost, and they could get lost in other things and sort of go off down a tangent. The more creative you are, I think the more prone you are to being a little bit less organized and stringent. So it's a delicate balance, and I think you need to learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself doing this job, and how to self-motivate yourself, and how to be more organized. And they're life skills that come with time that can't really be taught through something like university. And basically, if you look at the number of all-nighters that I used to do, where I would stay up all night to finish a project, they were quite numerous in my early 20s, and they are virtually non-existent now. I think I might have had to do a very late night in late 2021 or something, which was, I think it's the last time that I was really kind of like, oof, gosh, that was a very, very long day. But yeah, in general, I don't have to do all-nighters anymore. And I think that shows me that, I've obviously become a lot more organized and a lot better at planning things out. In terms of just, keeping my schedule on an even keel.
For those of you listening, we're going to pause for today and finish this interview in a second episode. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure to check out all of Blair's information in the episode notes, which will include a link to the series Nolly, which was recently nominated for 3 BAFTAs, including Blair for his score. As a reminder, a new website has also been launched for the podcast, which you can find in the episode notes as well. Make sure to subscribe to know when the next half of the interview is out, and we'll see you next time on The Composer's Life.